I'm healthy. Yeah.
Welcome to the Business Women Australia podcast show, the podcast that brings together industry leaders to discuss the latest trends, insights, and strategies. So sit back and relax. Let's get inspired by the amazing women who are shaping the future of professional women in Australia. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
So welcome to the Business Women Australia podcast show. I'm Lyn Hawkins. I'm the National Director of Business Women Australia. I'd like to acknowledge the lands in which I'm streaming in today. It's the lands, it's actually Manjugudup, and it's the lands of the Binjarab people of the Noongar Nation. And I'd like to really pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. This is the beautiful part of Western Australia. It's all waterways and it would have been very plentiful. I saw some photos actually in the old Bridge pub of what it was like in the 1800s, and there's massive amounts of fish and prawns and all the produce that was coming from the estuary and the river system here. And it would have been such a plentiful place for Aboriginal people. And so I just hold them in my heart, and just am very grateful to be here on their lands. And today we're streaming across Meta, across LinkedIn, across YouTube, and you can also find us for catch up on your channel, on your favourite channel, whether it's Spotify or iTunes or on the Business Women Australia website. And I'm super excited today. For this episode, we have the wonderful change management guru on the show today, who also happens to be an awesome person and a great friend that I've met through Business Women Australia. Tracy Cooper, welcome to the show.
Hello, Lyn Hawkins. How are you?
I'm great. And look, we're going to really dive into how to make change work today. This is a great subject, and you and I love chatting about this because we both share a passion for sort of change being really business as usual rather than being an event. And we're going to dive into that. And what I love about this particular episode today is that we're going to be looking at those who are leading with purpose and how they can actually manage this constantly evolving world. I mean, gosh, it feels like the pace of change is getting quicker by the year. So there's no organisation that is immune from having to evolve. So we're very lucky on the show today. Tracy brings years of experience guiding business owners, managers, senior executives and teams through complex transitions and through all the change that needs to come about. So she can share with us perhaps the common mistakes that leaders make during change and how to embed change into the culture so it is seen as normal and not disruptive. So this is a great show. So whether you're a CEO or a team leader or aspiring change champion within your organisation, stay on the show. As this episode is packed with wisdom, as I'm going to be picking the brains of Tracy. Now, Tracy, you've been a change specialist for a few decades now. I love how you utilise theory that you've developed, into this proven practical method for change. You've got so many tools in your toolkit. Every time I talk to you, there's some new thing that you're discussing, and I follow you on LinkedIn and I love your posts. So anyone who's listening to this, please find Tracy Cooper on LinkedIn, connect to her and, learn, because she's very generous with the knowledge that she shares. So share today for our listeners the story that led you to becoming a change specialist, and particularly one focused on purpose-driven leadership.
Thanks, Lyn. I think for me, change is something that I discovered early on in my career. So my initial career was in agriculture, and I worked with farming communities in Western Queensland. I grew up on a farm in northern New South Wales, merino wool and beef cattle, and I guess over the generations that have worked the land there, I understood a little bit about change. However, when I started to work in advisory and extension roles, which was working with growers and helping them think through their challenges and deal with what was coming at them, I started to realise that change was something not just on the side. It was something that we needed to embrace. But personally, I realised it wasn't so much the science of wool and sheep that I was interested in. It was people. And that's when I moved into working more in facilitation for Landcare Australia. And then I scored a position with the state government on a program called Building Rural Leaders, which was a program that I'm very proud to say is still referred to around Queensland. And I think that program came from regional rural communities and people who were saying, we need to understand how to change and how to lead change in our communities, in our businesses, and so forth. So that's when I first started to go, this change concept. And it was about helping people build their skills and their leadership work to do that. And then over several years of doing that, I said to a good friend, why don't we do this change stuff ourselves? And so we did, and we had a business called Sea Change. And I continued to work in the agri space, but I started to move into the not-for-profit areas, and it was very rewarding work, Lyn. Working with organisations, helping people who help people is something that's very important to me. So I stepped aside from that business last year, and I'm really now focusing on coaching and mentoring senior leaders who are leading change in their personal life and/or in their organisations particularly. And I am really narrowing in on that community services, not-for-profit, because it's a journey that is very rewarding for me, but it's also it's constantly changing. I mean, there's change happening in many sectors, but that is a sector it's facing a lot of change. Yeah.
So tell us, you talk about adaptive change and, adaptive organisations. Obviously with the evolution of every organisation, it's important for that adaptation. Tell us why that's critical now.
It's a good phrase, isn't it? Adaptive organisation. And I think it's so critical because change is a constant. It's not something that we did that last year and that's it for change. And it's being able as an organisation to act swiftly and respond to the changes that are going on, whether they're internal changes that you're encouraging and wanting to do yourselves within the business, but particularly the external changes that are going on in the environment around us, and particularly for the people we serve. So it's about how are we dealing with innovation, how are we fostering a learning culture so we can, that's what we did there, but what do we learn from that? So it's about how can we adapt and how can we adjust to what's the needs of the people, as I just said, that we serve, but also what's going on around us. And I think keeping on doing what you've always done is not going to cut it. It's about how we actually can continue to grow and learn and adapt to what we're doing. So those organisations who are adaptive are the ones who are on the front foot and they're reading what's going on around them and not just ploughing on with what they've always done. Yeah.
So what do you think are the mistakes that leaders are making? I mean, when you talk about adaptive organisations, that does, it's a fairly, for leaders who are wanting to keep things stable and be able to predict, costs and predict, processes and have things streamlined. I mean, being adaptive sounds chaotic.
It does, doesn't it? And it feels like that it's a rush. So that's actually one of my first responses to your question. What mistakes do they make? I do see leaders, they rush and they push. And I think that it's a bit of an oxymoron, but even though we've got to adapt quickly, we have to slow down in some ways so we can get our head around, not just us as the leaders, but about how are we going to engage our teams to come with us on this journey. Forcing change on people doesn't work. It's about how we slow down and be able to understand it, because there's as I just said before, and you said it too, Lyn, there's so much that continues to keep happening. We're probably just getting over the last change. So it's about how we can adapt to that. So one of the mistakes I see is leaders, they rush and they push. And sometimes these leaders I see when I talk to them, I was talking to one yesterday, they've had this change that they want to implement internally in their mind for 2 or 3 months. But they announce it and it's like, come on, let's go. And they're excited about it, but everyone else is in a little bit of shock and potential denial around what this means. So I guess that's that's to slow down. The other thing is I don't see alignment, particularly at the leadership team level. So I worked with a team recently, and there was 5 in the executive team, and I asked them each to write down what is this change that we're dealing with on a decent sized post-it note, and guess how many responses, different responses I got? 5. And that's okay to have the diversity, but they're all seeing it from a different lens. The key is to align around and utilize that different lens, but it's important because it sends such a strong message to the teams around you when you are aligned, because if you're not, everyone else sees it and they lose faith in the leadership team and they lose faith in the change itself. Another one I see, Lyn, is leaders who aren't present. It's a bit like they throw the ball and say, here you go, this is what we're going to do, and off you go, particularly to middle leaders. Make it happen, can you? Type thing. So you've got to be present because people still need their leader. They need to believe in someone and something to help them and to guide them through that journey. So, and I guess the last one, and it would be remiss of me not to mention this because I talk about it all the time on LinkedIn, is those who don't pause and just stop. Just pause and reflect on where you've come. How's things going? What's going well? What's not going well? And what are we learning? Because I said this in a post the other day, Lyn, what you know as you've gone along in the journey, you will know more than you did when you started. So it's about capturing those learnings, and the mistakes are to miss those learnings and to help your team realize what they're learning, because that is what's going to help them, a bit like the other question around adaptive organizations. When we can learn and transfer those learnings to other changes, we'll save time and we'll save energy. So they're just a few of the mistakes that I see.
Yeah, that sort of jumping onto that concept of the pause, really as a team pause, and the opportunity to sort of share questions and ideas and fears and some of the things that might be bubbling up for everyone. While it can be discomforting, and from a management point of view, it's like you don't really want to hear things that you can't fix, because it is uncomfortable. And people are doing extra time often during a time of change and working back and trying to do this on top of their existing jobs and all these sorts of things that can go on. We sometimes want to push things through because we don't want to have to deal with things that we haven't got answers for as middle level managers.
Oh, yes. And I think that is a very common challenge I see with some of my coaching clients. I don't have an answer to that. And I said, but do you have to have all the answers? And that's about how you can engage your team, particularly your middle leaders, because they're at the coalface. They're often faced with what's going on out on the ground, so to speak. And change isn't just a process, it's a human experience. So it's being able to tap into the people that you have and the knowledge and that synergy. So it throws this thinking that as the leader, you have to have the answers, you have to have the plan. It's utilizing your team. And that's why I say slowing down is the way to do that, because change isn't something that, I guess, happens to people. It's something that they do. It's how we do it. So it's engaging people, and they can come up with very rich ideas, and it gives them ownership to start thinking. Don't leave your brain at the door type thing. It's about how we can all contribute to making this happen. It's not about changing the fact that this is happening. It is happening, but how do we make this happen? And I think that's the key, is not just seeing it as a process or a tick box activity. It's about engaging the human element in your team.
Absolutely. Recently, I'm thinking about an experience, that I've witnessed where middle level manager sent out an email. No one's responded, so the assumption is that everyone's bought into it.
Yeah.
And it sort of gets raised at the team meeting around by one of the others saying, has anyone got any questions? And it's like no one's feeling safe to say anything. But there's all these little, side meetings and things going on outside the meeting. It's like, it's so important as a middle level manager, when you've been given that shitty job of having to sell the change and get people to buy in, is to actually go and give everyone an opportunity to just get things off their chest, even if it doesn't change anything, just to be seen and to be heard. and to build an environment where communication, even if it's uncomfortable communication, is actually encouraged. That's, I just see this a lot with various organizations, and I'm usually, in a different kind of role, not in the change management role, but I find it fascinating, and I often think, so many organizations are tackling these kind of change processes without having their middle levels managers being coached. They're being left on their own. The leaders have given them the shitty bit because they don't want to do it. They're not turning up to the meetings, and they look like they're not making friends. Because they aren't there to make friends, and in fact they're making enemies because they're trying to push it through too fast. Exactly all those things you're saying, and it's just it ends up blowing up in your face. It does take it just taking that time and thinking about the human side of all this is so important.
Very much. And I think Lyn, with what you've just said, I'll add a challenge that I constantly see. And I hear senior leaders say this to me: my middle leaders aren't stepping up to lead this change. And I say, really? I say, what is it that what are you doing? I'll put the question back to you. What are you doing to support your middle leaders? Because I see middle leaders are a bit like the meat and the sandwich. They actually have to try and get their head around what this change is and then deliver it to their teams. And they know often they're not going to get a very good reception because, as I said, they're often just trying to get through the last change that we were doing. So it is a business as usual thing. But I think one of the things that I think senior leaders, if I can be honest, expect too much of their middle leaders without the support that they need. So it's about slowing down. I keep saying it, pausing, slowing down to actually help those middle leaders get their head around why we are doing this to start with, and let them feed it back and let them share their concerns, let them share and be present as a senior leader for them. Don't run away. It's about how you can help them get clear on their role. What do they need to do this week? Step one is this. We'll just go this far this week. And then step two. So it's not about just here it is, off you go and make it happen. So it's about making sure, and sometimes I feel for middle leaders because they're often a subject matter expert, like they might have been risen to that supervisory role because they're good at XYZ, or they might be good at accounting, for example, or they might be good at engineering. But leading change is a whole different skill set, and often the toolkit is somewhat empty. So it's about, are you providing time for them or some coaching? I mean, that's what I do. I help middle leaders, coach them and or give them some tools for their kit so they can go, oh, okay. And the third part is get it clear about what they're supposed to do. Oh, am I supposed to do that? Okay, this is what I need you to do this week. And it's a partnership. It's not just throw the ball at them and you make everything happen. Yeah.
Do you see that, in a lot of change programs that the silos actually sort of everyone's kind of left for their silos, and that there might be an opportunity for the middle leaders to almost kind of, become like a leadership management team of their own right? Like we have these executive management teams sitting at the top, in the boardroom, working out the strategy, working out the changes, and then quite often, trying to disseminate that through the organisation based on their, where they want to take the organisation. But often the middle level managers are left within their kind of their silos in their department or their division rather than as a group, thinking about it. I'm sort of very interested in these kind of cross-functional, breaking down these kind of silos inside organisations, particularly to create cultures that are adaptive and embrace change and innovation.
Yes, I've worked with an organisation recently, Lyn, and this is what that middle leader level bit of a mouthful, is doing. They're actually they're coming from the different departments, so to speak, but they're coming together. I'm coaching them through some of their challenges, but then they'll split off and saying, well, this is what we're doing in finance and this is what we're doing here. But collectively, they talk about the fact that they're supporting each other, and it's good to know what's going on in this area and as opposed to that area. Oh, are you doing that? Okay. So they become a support network for each other as well, and they're funneling information that can then collectively go up to the executive team. So it's a support network, but it's also a communication way or communicative way to help people across the organisation understand what's happening with the change. And also because they are that at the coalface and seeing things, their information they've got is vital. So but that support network, they say, we love coming together in these sessions because we get to talk about where our challenges are, and they hear from their colleagues in other areas, oh, how did you solve that? So it becomes like a peer sharing as well, apart from
I love that idea. I'm always surprised that we don't encourage that. It's particularly in large organisations where there's quite a few divisions and departments, with these middle level managers to build up their kind of best practices and knowledge sharing and looking at how the processes can impact on each other. They're all a customer of a process, and quite often a change over here can impact a customer before or after that, the process that particular group is bringing a change into as well. So it's really interesting. So, I mean, at the end of the day, change is constant. And how should we view change in our organisations, sort of moving away from sort of considering it as an episode or a project? I know you laugh at that, but we all, like, in businesses, we're still doing this.
Episode, I like that, an episode. Yeah,
an episode, and it feels like an episode. I've had an episode. I've just actually seen one of my clients, a law firm, actually bring about a completely new practice management system, only to pull it back out and go back to the old one because it just was so disruptive and didn't work and didn't achieve what they thought it was going to be achieved because the sales guy sort of sold them something that it didn't do. It was very disruptive, cost the organisation a fortune. But these are the lessons learned,
Yeah, well, and I think we've got to be careful with change, because your example is a good one there. Change is constant, and when I say that, I mean the opportunity for change is constant. But, we don't change for change's sake. I mean, everyone knows that saying, but it's about, I think it comes back to, is it going to help us save time? Is it going to help us be more efficient? Is it going to help us serve our people that we serve better? Are we responding to the external world in a different way? So that's why I would think we have to define why we need to change or want to change. It's not because it's a shiny lantern or a shiny light and let's just go that way. So it is, the opportunity for change is constant, but I think the decision to change needs to be well considered, and it needs to be thought through, not just by the senior leaders. I would include middle leaders in that thinking, and because, again, they are the ones at the coalface. So it's a consultation process. It doesn't mean that they can direct everything, but hearing from them really is important. So I think it's slowing down and taking stock. And I think your example is a good one, Lyn. When you get so far with something, go, well, I think we just need to slow down and have a look here. Should we keep going? It's a bit like when you're on a journey and you feel you're lost. Should we keep going, or should we stop and go in another direction? And that's this constant habit, I call it a habit, of pausing. And do we need to course correct or just keep going, just persevere because we just hit a bit of a high or a low part in our journey?
Yeah, look, coming from a tech background, I see a lot of organisations embrace a new tech kind of platform or something that they think they're going to save money on, particularly in the CFOs going, oh, this is a cheaper system, or this is a cheaper CRM, or this is, got a few more bells and whistles, all this sort of stuff. There's all these, and they're not necessarily factoring in the cost of implementing the change and the disruption and they haven't also often worked with their existing supplier to see if the system can be modified and changed and made more efficient and more cost effective. So it's like sometimes it's an awful saying, throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but but that's what happens sometimes too. Like I'll quite often say, with that last customer relationship management system that you had, did you work with your existing suppliers to see if it could evolve and if you could actually, could your experiences with this make it better for them? Can their developers make it more efficient, and can they reduce the price before you disrupt everything?
Yeah, and I think what I've often heard people who are the main users, for example, of that CRM, I've had them say to me in sessions, and they are middle leaders, they'll say, no one actually asked us. We could have told them some things that we know about this existing system. The decision was made either by a board and or very seniors who don't have their fingers in the pie daily. If they just asked us and involved us, we could have actually given some ideas and some feedback, and maybe not to stop this new CRM, but to actually adjust or just course correct a little bit in what we actually needed. What do we need here? That's the key part that those middle leaders can help you with. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just such a great area. Oh my God, you're in such a great space and you know your stuff so well. So look, when we talk about, leading with purpose, what does it really mean to lead with purpose in times of uncertainty and disruption? What tips can you share to our listeners who are really in these kind of constantly evolving environments where there's changes are given, and they're in for purpose environments? But what are your tips for them?
I guess my tip, Lyn, is, and I find working, because I do work in this area, community services, not-for-profit, early learning, those sorts of things, they are very driven by their why and their purpose, and keep that as your guiding compass. Keep it there. So things that are coming at you will say, well, how does this fit with our why, with our purpose of our organisation? Because people are very wedded to it. I'm not saying that they're not in other sectors, but it's just they're very wedded to it. And be careful of shiny lights and new attractive things that are going to take us away from what we are here to do. So it is getting clear on the strategies and the activities that you're doing, but also the purpose. And I think it needs to align. Where does your change that you're proposing fit in with all of that? How does it save you time? Does it make life easier? Does it help us serve our people better? What is it that it's going to do? So your purpose should be driving like a compass. That's what it should be doing. And when opportunities arise, I guess it's about slowing down and doing some of that creative and critical thinking. How does it fit? Does it fit? If it doesn't, or is it just a shiny light? Is it going to take us off track? So we need to stick with what it is that, and that's why I like working with purpose-driven organisations, because they're very clear on why they're there, and there's often no confusion around that. So, not every opportunity is there for the taking. It could be an opportunity, but it's not just going to fit with where we're at and what we're trying to achieve, particularly with our strategy and or at the moment. So yeah, I'm not someone who's about just keep changing everything. It's not every opportunity is there for the taking. Does it fit? How does it fit? That's my question. Yeah.
I love that. And it just throws the light on what innovation really is, and innovation in, I love the sort of Kaizen concept, in Japan, of these incremental steps of evolution that just tweak and serve those better purposes. And they can be very minor and very small. They don't need to be these massive change, upheavals and change for change's sake. You always say it.
Yeah.
Avoid change for change's sake. And I think people think about how we've got to adapt to evolving and disruptive environments as being on the lookout all the time. But that isn't the answer. That's not the answer, is it? It's about that steady as you go, and doing all that work up front that so many people don't do, by getting someone like you in and sort of facilitating and looking at all the different aspects of change. I know you talk about the 6 hats, even doing that with your team before you've even decided whether or not you want to go ahead with it or not. Exactly. Is going to bring so much more common sense and depth to the decision about embarking on the change, and actually gets you to go in, to do more research. You put the right hat on, and that's going to actually you're going to be asking a whole bunch of questions that you can't answer. You've got to go out and find more information, right? That's in itself a part of the process of change.
Yes, that's one of the tools I use, the 6 thinking hats. Each colour means a different thing, and the white hat means facts. And that's often where I start. What are the facts around the current situation? And if we're proposing change here, but let's have a look at what the current situation is. What facts do we know? I often ask this question. What facts do we know? And what facts actually don't we know? And the thing I say to people, if you don't, of course, there's a few there that you don't know, let's halt this decision before you run off and just make it. Let's go and get some facts before you actually make that decision, because it can very much influence the whole process. So sometimes the red hat means feelings, and if it's your idea, you can be very much pushing and yes, I'm very excited and so forth, and you can be overlooking the facts, and the facts that we have versus the facts that we don't know. Go and find them. And then I have never made a decision, Lyn, that I've regretted using those hats. I use them all the time in my personal life, in my business, with clients, and it helps me see, or all of us see, things from different angles, because we often can look at things through a certain lens. And this is the power of actually the thinking that goes in before you start the change process. Don't just make the decision, just do this change, and then it's like a train wreck behind. It's like, well, maybe we don't need to change. Let's just have a look. Do we need to tweak, as you said, or do we need to alter something? Yeah.
Oh my God. I knew about De Bono's hats many years ago, and how often have I forgotten to use them, Tracy Cooper?
Well, I suggest you whip them out. Actually, normally they're sitting here behind me, but I use them all the time. I use them all the time because it might surprise some people to know that I often wear the black hat, which is caution, risk. My dad was he was a farmer. He was a funeral director, but he was also a fireman, all the F's. And he used to often say to us as kids, whenever we'd walk into a building, how are you going to get out of there if there's a fire? And he bred this thinking of risk and caution into it. So I often put my black hat on and go to risk straight up. And but I then need to put my yellow hat on and go, well, what are the benefits? So yeah, the hats are brilliant.
Great. They are brilliant, and they're very great in a partnership and in any sort of leadership group, where you're all coming from a different perspective. You know me, I've always got my yellow hat on. Let's just do it.
Oh, you've got the green. You've got the green. The green hat on, Lyn Hawkins. The green hat. Opportunity. Here's an opportunity.
Yeah. That's like, oh gosh, it's poor Simon. He's exhausted.
Yes.
Don't ask Simon how he thinks about the move. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the key leadership qualities. Tell us, what are those key leadership qualities that support what we call successful, sustainable change? So the leadership qualities that we need to be embracing as leaders.
Yeah, well, I've thought about this long and hard for a long time, Lyn, and I came up with my secret sauce of change, and there's 6 ingredients in my secret sauce. So the overarching part of the sauce is to not force change on people, help them choose it. So that's the overarching strategy. And the ingredients in my secret sauce, the first one is commitment by you as a leader. They're all C's, by the way. Did I say that? They're all C's. Commitment by the leader. So turn up, show up, be there for your team, and you have to be committed. You don't have to be half-baked about this. It's like you're on board, because people can see it. You need to be committed yourself. Clarity. Get very clear about your case for change. Why are we changing? It's some of the stuff we've already talked about here. Why now? What if we don't change? So getting that case for change very clear, and it's so helpful to get that clarity around it, because it helps you with your comms when you start to talk to other people and launch it to other people in the organisation or other stakeholders. Next one is consideration of others. So as a leader, it's really important to just show some empathy and compassion for others, and hear about this may not be easy for them. So it's the listening part of being a leader in change is vital, absolutely vital. Stop talking and start listening to what people have to say. I think cohesive leadership team, very important. I've touched on it. If they're not aligned, it's so obvious, and people will lose faith. Next one is communication. Communicate. You don't just send an email once and expect people to get it. There's a mixture of communication, written communication, speaking at meetings. Communication also means listening, hearing ideas, so forth. So change and communication, to me, go very much hand in hand. And the last C is co-create. It's about how you can utilize, I touched on it earlier, utilize your team, particularly your middle leaders, to help you think about the how we're going to do this. And even, before you start the decision to do it, should we do it? But it's also about that co-creation. So all those C's when you demonstrate those as a leader, it's going to help people come on board and choose that change eventually. I mean, they're not going to jump on board straight away, but by your behavior as a leader and how you lead this change will actually really help or hinder people coming on board with it and deciding to get on the bus and come on the change journey with you.
And, leaders who are, sort of wanting to do this and to lead in these ways, demonstrating these qualities and, embarking on these processes, it's so important to know that you can get help. You don't have to do it on your own. And I think that's where I loved, when you sort of started to bring in that coaching element to your service delivery. I thought I saw that as such a great opportunity, because we quite often see, a change team coming in, change specialists coming in, helping, working, and then leaving, rather than your focus, which is working with, as a coach to the leader who's really, at the apex of this change and at the organisation, but also helping them then lead their leadership team, and then their leadership team then helping lead and support their management teams, who can support, the teams at the coalface. So it's like, it's like being an elite athlete, having a coach. When you're at the top of your game, you don't have to know how to do it all on your own. It's really helpful to have someone that's independent outside the organisation who is experienced and has all these great things that they can share. Alison's just jumped on LinkedIn. She said she's Googled the 6 thinking hats. How interesting. This is the thing about having someone that comes into your world that is an expert with this stuff, who can give you these amazing tools and share with you. It's like having, you've got a game plan around your performance on track and field or in a team, having the coach that's seeing things and got things to bring in that then you can utilize out there. When you're out there performing, it just makes total sense. So, when we look at those qualities, what are the biggest challenges that you see when it comes to shifting this organizational culture to be embracing change as business as usual, and just this is the way we do things?
Yeah, I think I was only speaking to someone this morning about shifting culture, and I think one of the greatest things I've learned in my time, Lyn, is that it touches on what you just said before, is you don't have to have all the answers. And I think as a leader, telling people we need to change our culture or how we're going to do this doesn't mean that it'll happen. And it's about engaging people. And I use the word orchestrate, like the conductor out the front of an orchestra. They don't necessarily have to play an instrument, but they help make the music happen. And that is what I see as the role of a leader. So it's about designing how we're going to do this together and engaging people and their thoughts in that journey, because I guess it's where are we now with our culture, but where do we want to be? What's the future state, and what's the gap? So that's the key of, and I think how you were describing my coaching services, I guess I'm also a facilitator as well as a coach, and I'm a qualified change manager. So I've got the 3 strings to the bow, and that facilitating those conversations is very powerful. And sometimes there are change people who come into an organization and do the change for them and leave. Okay, that's fine. But I don't go with that approach. I go with more about how do we engage those people in there to do it themselves. So, and that's how I help organizations think about how they're going to change the way they do things and their culture to make change a part of what they do. It's what behaviors do we need to change? That's the key. Not just, yep, this is what we're going to do and we're going to live those values. Yeah, it's more about what behaviors need to change, and the team needs to contribute to that.
It's so vital to have that external and independent facilitator as well. And I see another mistake that a lot of businesses make is actually having someone internal that becomes a facilitator. They've got the whiteboard marker and they're brainstorming or what have you. They haven't got the toolkit. They're also got some sort of attachment to,
Exactly.
what's going to happen inside the organisation. So they're not truly independent, and they're also a part of the internal politics. So there may be some issues, around someone they think who talks too much or what have you. So, or whatever. So it's so important for organizations to have an external person who can have these kinds of roles that really help you get the best out of everyone, and that everyone gets heard and everyone contributes to each aspect of that. So, if you're listening to this call, here you have someone who's got these amazing toolkit, who can facilitate, who can coach, and who can help you manage that. And I love the way you describe an organization to become a learning organization, because any individual, any group of individuals, or an organization that's focused on learning will evolve and adapt. And that is, at the end of the day, what I love about how you really describe that. But what about your own vision for the next 5 years, Tracy? What does that look like, and how are you preparing for that?
That's a good question, Lyn. Well, I guess my first response will be there'll be change. There's constant change. I was in an Uber yesterday coming back from the city from an event, and the Uber driver asked me, what is it that you do? And I was telling him, and he said, is there need for that sort of thing still? And I went, and I smiled and I said, well, the world is constantly changing. Yes. And we got talking about AI and different things like that. But I do think that for me, I will always keep, even in my own business, keep looking out on the horizon and saying, what are the people I serve? What are they needing? Have the goalpost shifted? And I think that's what we need to keep doing, all of us keep doing for the next 5 years, because even some of the things that I started out with in this consulting world, I don't do anymore, because it's not as relevant. So I think it's adapting how I run my business and how I if I had a thought way back as an ag graduate, I'd be sitting in front of a computer screen coaching people online, I would have went, what? It's just, and I thoroughly enjoy the ability to do a bit of both. I do stuff online. I do stuff in the UK. I do stuff in Europe, even online. So I can touch all parts of the world in what I'm doing. But it's also, I love being face to face with people as well. So I guess a long-winded way of answering your question is for me personally to be continually thinking about, is my service still relevant? Am I still relevant? And what do I need to keep adapting to make sure that I am?
Yeah, there's some big questions in there, and that raises probably another episode topic that we can delve into, and that is, how to maybe actually start evolving your strategic thinking in your organization, and to identify the areas within your business that are going to require the human element, and those that can be made more efficient through the use of AI. And it is exciting. It's wonderful. There's great opportunities, and it is going to make an impact. There will be jobs today that will be probably not needed in the next 3 to 5 years. They'll just be wiped out completely. I'm seeing that already, and it's exciting. It's exciting, but it's also we can't imagine what the opportunities are going to be out of this, and the productivity that we can have. And it's around that, that it's those things that, what do we bring as a human into the human experience of the world? And I loved that book back in 2000, The Experience Economy. And I'm going back to thinking I must dust that off my shelf and read it again, because I've got a feeling that that's going to be more relevant going forward in the world of AI than ever before. So, let's think about how we can be creative around the human experience, around, being learning humans, about being joyful and enjoying interactions with, that bring good to each other and good to our world, that are memorable and meaningful in our lives. So big questions there, Tracy Cooper. Always love being on a big question with you.
Big questions. And I think to finish, Lyn, what I would say is that I'm on a mission to change how change is done. It's about, it doesn't have to be a tick box activity. It's still some of that human-centered approach. And even though we have to adapt and move relatively quickly with what's going on around us, I keep saying slow down and just regularly catch your breath, but also slow down so people can come on the journey with you and choose to do that. Yeah.
I love that, Tracy Cooper. Thanks for coming on the show. We're going to get you back again. We will brainstorm our next topic soon. But always a pleasure having Tracy Cooper, Change Specialist, on the Business Women Australia podcast show. For those of you who are listening and have stayed through for the entire show, thank you so much. For those of you who are in catch-up, it's great that you're supporting us. Please like, share, comment. Support Business Women Australia. We're a great community of leaders across every state, across every sector, across every profession. And if you want to join Business Women Australia, we'd love you to. So reach out to me, Lyn at businesswomenaustralia.com.au. We'd love to have you involved. Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks, Lyn.
You have been listening to the Business Women Australia podcast show. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode and gained some valuable insights to empower you on your journey. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to stay updated in our latest episodes. And if you're not already a member of Business Women Australia, what are you waiting for? Head to our website today and join so that you can connect with a thriving community of inspiring women across Australia. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.